Yay.
You guys are very, very kind. Thank you. It's nice being a Las Vegas resident and seeing so many excited Las Vegas salespeople. I don't think most of you probably know that in Earl Nightingale's career, which he had 88 years of great work he did. I guess we'll have to ask everybody again, mute themselves.
It's also on the tape to make sure it's here, okay?
And then we're good to go?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on there. Ed, I can't, for some reason, it's not letting me mute him.
Hi, good morning. This was for
If you hover over their picture on the top right, you should be able to mute them.
I think I just took care of it.
Good, thank you, Rick. In 1956, which of course was a long time ago, Earl Nightingale at age 35 retired, financially independent. He was a life insurance salesperson for many, many years. When he got out of college, he became a life insurance agent. He then went into the motivational industry that Rick and I, of course, are very familiar with. I'm sitting with Earl Nightingale, and it was probably 1968, again, a long time ago, in his office in Chicago. And I said to Earl, how did the life insurance business come about? And Rick, he shared with me a story, and I don't know, there's no way to validate 100% the truth behind it, but I'm assuming it was pretty close. He said a group of business guys like Mark and Rick and myself and John Joseph sat in a boardroom, and they said, what is the biggest problem the American public have? And he said the problem they discovered was when we get close to retirement age, we're not financially prepared to live the rest of our life comfortably. And therefore, many people have to work into the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. So they said, what if we asked every American to give us $3 or $4? Now, this was in the 1930s, $3 or $4 a month. And we would take that money and invest it. And then when they turned 65, we would give them back their money so they could live their life comfortably. Because their thought was, Rick, that here we are in the richest country in the world, and the majority of people work 40, 45 years and end up not having anything to live the remaining years of their life on. And that's how the life insurance business came about. And it was interesting because right afterwards, the government then created Social Security. And of course, the joke is life insurance pays you back the money that you paid. Social Security does not. So that's one of the challenges we all face. But it was interesting because, Rick, you and I have talked about Earl Nightingale for probably 30 years, time and time again. And in his great recording, The Strangest Secret, what he talked about was the fact that 95% of the people never set a goal, never have a plan, and therefore never succeed at a high level. And of course, his job from age 35 to the time he passed away was to help all of us learn how to live a little bit better life. And all he talked about was planning. You've got to learn to plan what you're trying to accomplish. For those that don't understand, if you look at Rick's schedule, in a normal year, Rick, your schedule is planned almost a year in advance. You're going to be in Arizona, you're going to be in Nevada, you're going to be in California, you're going to be doing workshops, you're going to be doing retreats, you're doing coaching. The planning that goes into what Rick and I do is the most important part of what Rick and I do. The execution is easy once the plans are made. So what I'm going to do today, Rick, is I'm going to take them through a whole series of thoughts. And I know this being recorded, which I appreciate, and then be distributed so they can watch it time and again. But I'm also going to send Rick a copy of my notes, and anybody that wants a copy can contact Rick and he'll forward them to you. Because I would rather you listen and try to absorb than have to worry about taking a lot of thoughts down. So let me start by reading a couple of thoughts to you. I wrote a business plan is nothing more than a roadmap to the goals that you set for the year. It's a working document that will change and be updated as the year proceeds. So what I want to say to all of you is as you sit down and you plan 2021, don't be embarrassed about the fact that maybe after the first quarter, you take your pen and you cross something out and write something new, because it's a working document, okay? It's not set in stone. It's not something that you're not going to be looking at all the time. I wrote down a business plan revolves around three things: setting a production goal, the development of your skills, and understanding the numbers which support the plan itself. So it starts with the production goal. So let's play a little game. So let's ask everybody to, in their minds, answer three questions. Number one, how many transactions do you want to do in 2021? How many do you want to have closed? Listing sold, buyer controlled sales. So let's just say, Rick, that somebody says, I'm going to really do something big. I'm going to do 35 next year. I go, great. Then number two, what is the amount of an average commission check? Okay. Rick, what is an average commission check for your company in Las Vegas?
It's
What would
about
you guess?
$11,000. 11,000 gross commission. It's about 14 in Arizona, and it's close to, 20 in California.
11,000. Boy, you and I can think back 10 years ago where it was less than half of that in Nevada, so especially in Southern Nevada.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to do 11 or 35 transactions, average commission 11,000. I'm going to make 350 to 375,000 if I actually follow the plans that I've set. So what I want you to get excited about is the opportunity that you have to do something that you may not have done before. So the first part of business planning is just having a basic fundamental goal. It doesn't have to be exotic. It doesn't have to be 10 pages. It doesn't have to be, what it means to you mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's a number. And let's say in this case, the number is 35 as an example. So first we look at the production goal. Second, we have to look at the skills and we have to evaluate our skills. What I've discovered, Rick, and I'm sure you've seen it time and again, the agent gets excited about the goal. They say, Rick, I'm going to do something I've never accomplished before. I'm going to really do it at a high level. And then after 30, 45 days, nothing is taking place because the skills don't support the goal. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask everybody to do a little skills evaluation. And again, you'll get a copy of these notes so you can do this individually. But I'm going to take you through and ask you to think about the following skills. And then I'm going to ask you to rate yourself from 1, which would be the worst, to 10 being the best when it comes to skills. Because the truth is, and I know John Joseph, who is part of your team at the company and one of our coaches, will tell all of his clients, you're only as good as the skills you have. Okay? The Las Vegas Raiders, okay, their record is not the best yet, but all they work on every day is developing skills. That's all they work on is skills. So whether it be a businessman, okay, whether it be a real estate agent, a professional athlete, skills are the foundation. So here's the skills. First of all, writing a production-based schedule. That is the hardest part of real estate, right there. We're creating a production-based schedule. How good are you at setting a schedule? And more importantly, how good are you at following it? What are the common distractions that you face in the schedule you have? The good news is, during the pandemic from March through today, a majority of all people work at home. And everybody thought working at home would be actually less distractions. It's probably more distractions. And if you're a single man or woman by yourself, you create distractions. If you're a married man or woman with kids, they create them for you. So what I want you to look at in your schedule is, what are the distractions that pull you off your schedule? What are the things that yank you off? And I think what Rick said earlier was important. Are you spending too much time on social media, for example, while you should be prospecting? Are you thinking about a transaction and the problems that it's having instead of staying on your schedule to create the next transaction? So I'm going to ask you to create a schedule and then rate yourself from 1 to 10 at how good you are at following that schedule. The second skill, Rick, is part of yours and my life, which is prospecting and lead generation. I would say to you, Rick, you and I have known each other for probably more than 30 years now, I would assume, correct?
Yeah, since 19.
I think when we met, I had dark hair and you had hair.
That's right.
So that's how long ago it was for
Full
the two.
head.
And my hair is white. Well, interesting because if you understand, guys and gals, that whether you like it or not, prospecting will solve every production problem an agent could ever have. If you talk to enough people, you're going to win the game. If your attitude is bad, you're going to win the game. If your attitude is good, you're going to win in a big manner. If you have good scripts, you're going to win. If you have bad scripts, you can still win if you just do it enough. So Fahad Assad down in Naples, Florida, said to us many years ago, we have to strengthen the link between prospecting and achieving the goals we've set. When that link is strengthened, then we're going to achieve the goals we set. So I'm going to ask everybody to rate themselves on a scale from 1 to 10. How good are you at prospecting, and how good are you getting rid of the distractions you have? The third skill is the one that is the most abused, Rick, of all the skills that an agent has, which is developing and working the database. I mean, it is absolutely everybody's personal gold mine, the database. To maximize the use of your database, you got to talk to these people at least 4 to 5 times a year. You have to have intelligent conversations. You have to bring things of value to that conversation. And I listen to all the stories. I listen to all the excuses as to why I don't call my database. But the truth is, if you're not calling your database, somebody else is calling your database. And that somebody else is getting the listings and the leads and the production that should be coming back to you. So on a scale from 1 to 10, again, how would you rate your skill at working your database? The next skill, and this goes way back to the days of Rick, you and I talking to people like Ron Wexler and some of those great agents we met over the years, aggressive lead follow-up. Aggressive lead follow-up. A mutual friend of Rick's and mine, John Ferber, said one time on the stage at a superstar retreat, how often do you lose a transaction because you were too aggressive in your lead follow-up? And then he smiled and said, I'll bet the answer is never. And even if a buyer or seller says to you, you're being too aggressive in your follow-up, the response, of course, is, I want to demonstrate what I'm going to do once you sign the contract with me. I'm going to be that aggressive to work to get your home sold. 70% of all listing and showing appointments come from aggressive lead follow-up. They don't come from the first call. The first call initiates the name. The first call initiates the interest. The follow-up is what gets you the appointments that we have to go on. So what is your hang-up regarding aggressive lead follow-up? Talk to your manager, talk to Amanda, talk to Rick, talk to your coach, because once we solve that problem, you're going to be excited about the follow-up you're going to do. Without aggressive lead follow-up, your business plan is never going to function at the highest level. On a scale from 1 to 10, how do you rate your follow-up? Pre-qualifying buyers and sellers. Rick, Sabrina and I had this wonderful concierge doctor in Las Vegas. Wonderful guy. We've had him for years. And
Dr. Ken?
I'm sorry?
Did Dr. Ken?
Oh, well, Dr. Ken is, of course, my chiropractor, Dr.
Oh, that's right.
And it's so interesting because Dr. Brown, which he's over off Tropicana, great guy, but it doesn't matter what's going on. If I walk into his office, before anything else happens, they take my blood pressure, my temperature, and my pulse. And I always say to him, my temperature hasn't changed, my pulse hasn't changed, my blood pressure is still normal. Why do you do it? He said, because it's part of the pre-qualifying process. Folks, how do you know the motivation? How do you know their ability to take action? How do you know if they are motivated to take action? How do you know if they're willing to sign a contract if you don't pre-qualify? Hal Swayze, who a lot of you know, a wonderful agent in California. About 3 or 4 years ago, Hal calls me out of nowhere. The guy makes $2 million a year. That's a lot of money. And he calls me and he said, I have a confession. I said, well, my collar's on forward, not backward. Go ahead. What's the confession? He said, Mike, there's 2 or 3 pre-qualifying questions I absolutely never ask. And I think they cost me $100,000 a year in business. I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, I'm going to start asking. even the best people, okay, even the best agents that we know at times skip some of the questions. The doctor never skips any of the questions. The attorney never skips any of their questions. The professional pilot never skips anything on the pre-flight checklist. How good are you at pre-qualifying? What is your hang up? What is stopping you? And on a scale from 1 to 10, is that particular skill going to interrupt the flow of accomplishing the business plan that you set? The next, of course, skill is the listing presentation. You know, I'm always amazed, Rick, because, you know, if I get a come list me, which is not very common for most agents, there's not a lot of presentation involved. But if you're prospecting and getting referrals from your database, you have to perform. And that performance is based on the value you bring to the seller. And the higher the value, I mean, folks, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services offers the highest value of any company in North America today, in my opinion. And I think most of you would agree with that 100%. I mean, that name is rock solid, but it's not enough if you don't know how to present the value proposition to the seller. So the practice of working on your listing presentation, the practice of following the scripts, the practice of smiling, the practice of understanding that they have concerns, objections, and questions, and how you respond. Rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10.
Whatever way, the more way or whatever way we can come up with, the better.
Here it goes again.
Are we all set again, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay. The next skill is showing property, of course, and showing presentation is about questions you choose to ask. Folks, either we're telling them why they should buy the property, or we're asking questions to get them involved in the purchase of the home. Because showing property is nothing more than asking a lot of questions to get the buyer involved. On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself on showing property? Handling objections is the next skill. And you know what's fun? We can list virtually on our hands all the objections that a seller is going to give us. I want to think it over. I have a friend in the business. I want to compare your company to Coldwell Banker. Let's see, I want more than what you're willing to list it for. I want a shorter listing than what you're asking for. These are all normal objections. So here's a thought. Between now and Christmas, list the objections that give you the most trouble, role play and practice and learn the answers. So when January comes about, instead of closing 20% of your appointments, you close 70% of your appointments. How good are you at handling objections on a scale from 1 to 10? Closing and negotiating is the next skill. And it's interesting because closing is really nothing more, and we all know this, than a natural ending to a good presentation. It's bringing people together. Negotiating is taking party A and party B and making sure that they understand what each of them wants so they both win in this process. That's what negotiating is. But it's nothing more than simplicity of communicating to a buyer and seller why they should be both looking at the acceptance of this transaction. On a scale from 1 to 10, how good are you at that? And the last skill is probably the hardest, which is administration of the transaction. Watch escrow coordinators, transaction coordinators, mortgage, title. These people are all there to take care of us. The question is, why do we hesitate to delegate? And it's something that I think everybody in management and leadership has to think about with agents. We don't delegate because we're afraid if I delegate, that person might make a mistake. Well, one thing we know for sure, if we let the average agent handle the transaction, they're going to make mistakes. Yeah. So let's let the professional make a mistake because they have the ability to solve the problem when they make a mistake. And that allows us to go out and do more transactions. So if we say to ourselves, okay, there's 10 basic skills that I have to really command and be good at. I have 60 to 65 days to look at which skills are holding me back from achieving the goals I've set. And wouldn't it be great, Rick, if every one of the great agents in BHHS, Nevada, Arizona, California would submit to their manager the list of the 3 or 4 skills they need to improve upon So the management of the company and Rick's training could help you improve on those skills.
Yeah.
Because we're all here for one purpose, and that is to improve the quality of what the work we do as professional agents. So watch, production goal, skills, but the hard part of our business is the tracking of numbers. And that's the challenge everybody faces. Learning what the numbers mean, understanding the strengths and weaknesses that numbers expose us to, helping the numbers move us down the path a little bit quicker. These are all critically important. So Rick, probably 90, I'm doing a 6-week action workshop in San Diego, California. And I'll never forget, this lady walks up to me and she goes, I am numbers challenged. I said, tell me what that means. I hate the numbers in real estate. I said, well, ma'am, real estate is all about numbers. I said, are you selling any houses? She goes, no. Do you have any listings? She goes, no. I said, do you know why? She goes, no. I said, because you don't know your numbers. It's not that complicated. And what's interesting, she went on to become one of the great agents in San Diego and still is one of the great agents today. So let's work under the assumption that most agents are numbers challenged. So what I'm going to ask Rick is the simplicity, and that's what you and I do best, I think. How many people did you talk to today? How many leads did you generate? How many appointments did you go on? And how many contracts did you get signed? In most cases, the first two numbers are pretty easy. Just every time you talk to a person about real estate, you put a check mark on a piece of paper, total them up at the end of the day. I talked to 18 people today. How many leads did you get? I got 1. Any appointments? 0. Any contracts? 0. Track simple numbers every day to get you through the challenge that people have. But I always say the fastest way to learn a person's strengths and weaknesses and the levels of efficiency to succeed is to track what you do. So, Rick, you're a great coach. You coach people all the time and the results speak for themselves. But you and I both know in coaching, if they're not tracking their numbers, we can't evaluate what they're doing. If they're going on 4 listing presentations a month and taking 1 listing, you and I know they have a problem. And the tracking of the numbers identifies to you as an agent and to Rick and I what that problem would be. So here's the hardest part of tracking your numbers. Tracking numbers are black and white. They're not complicated. And they remove the emotional responses people have to the real estate business. Okay, so I think I've probably done this example 1,000 times. If I write the number 100 on the blackboard, on a whiteboard in front of the group, and underneath I write the number 20, and then I write the number 11,000, which is the average commission check in Nevada. And then I multiply 11,000 times 20, I've got about $230,000 in income. So I went on 100 presentations. I took 20 listings that sold. I got paid $11,000, made $200,000, and in Las Vegas, $200,000 is a very substantial living. Southern California, $200,000 is just a living, okay? Arizona, it's a moderate living. So Nevada is a less expensive state to live in, so $200,000 is okay. However, if I track my numbers and I go on 100 presentations and you follow the advice that Rick and I give every day, you could list 70 instead of 20. And if 70 sell, now you make 700,000. And 700,000 is 500,000 better than if you only do 20 transactions. So the efficiency of tracking your numbers is what makes you really good at what you do. Because we can learn. See, Rick and I know that if you track your numbers, we can identify your strengths and your weaknesses almost instantly. So a person goes on 10 presentations, lists 3 properties. You and I know they probably did not pre-qualify. You and I know they probably were not very strong in their presentation. And you and I know that when they got an objection, they couldn't handle it. So what I say to everybody is this: tracking your numbers along with developing your skills to attain the goal you set just it's a natural flow to help you write your business plan so you can be more effective. So I want to reiterate that everything that I have said so far in the first half hour, Rick, I'll send it to you today. I'll let you decide who wants to get a copy of it. If they request a copy, they can get a copy of all my notes. So let's now take a look. Rick, I did a program earlier today for an Intero broker in Northern California. And he made a comment which I hadn't thought about very much. He's been a client of mine like you for probably 25, 30 years. His first name is, excuse me, his first name is Rishi, R-I-S-H-I. And Rishi said something on our webinar about an hour and a half ago. He said, the greatest part of what Mike Ferry asks of us in our business plan is the simplicity of the plan. He had a copy of a competitor's business plan, 48 pages of information, and that's very common. Most of the big companies offer very exotic and very strong business plans. I'm not smart enough to write that many pages. My business plan is 6 pages, and we could easily condense it into 2.5 or 3. The simplicity of the plan is what makes the business plan work, okay? So what I want to do is this. I want everybody to think about the business plan in this significance. The first part of a plan is a recap of what we have done the previous year. So watch, how much income were you paid? Approximately how much did you have in business expenses? How many deals did you close? Interestingly enough, Rick, and you and I know this for a fact, most agents don't know how many deals they've closed. So go to the company, go to your manager, find out this information. How many listing appointments did you go on? How many listings did you take? How many listings did you sell? Folks, if you have listings today that are not selling, they're overpriced, period. Because everything reasonably priced is selling.
Yeah.
How many buyer sales did you have? What's your average sales price? Average commission check? Average hours worked per week? This pandemic has screwed up everybody's lives dramatically. Okay, there's no question about it. But it's also allowed us, if we choose to become more focused on our work. So how many hours you're working per week? How many pendings do you have? How many listings do you have in inventory? How many days did you work? So I did some research, Rick, and I found out that the government says there are 265 work days in a year. The average real estate agent that you and I are exposed to works 200 to 210. What are you doing with your time? Okay. And why aren't you investing it in the highest return, which is your business plan? So how many hours did you prospect for the year? How many contacts did you make? Having a recap allows us to see the reality of what we have done. And most people don't want to do the recap because they don't want to see the reality of what they've done. So the recap is the first part of the plan that is vitally important. The second part of the plan is your production goals, okay? Income goal, closed deal goal, appointment goal, listings taken goal, listings sold goal, etc. It's not complicated. Again, Pat McVeigh, my broker that I've talked about, Rick, for years with you and Amanda and the team, I mean, he was so simple. He just said, Mike, just take a 3x5 card and write down what you want to accomplish. Well, today, of course, we have something a little more exotic, which is a simple plan. But see, the goals you've set. Now, if you believe what Earl Nightingale said, which is we become what we think about most of the time, then it's easy to accept the fact that if I write down a goal and I look at it every week and I share my business plan with my manager, I share my business plan with my coach, I share my business plan with my accountability partners, my role play partners, with my spouse, if I have a spouse, with my partner. If I share my business plan with my assistant, I'll have more and more people helping me stay on that track, which I have to stay on. The hardest part of a business plan, in my opinion, is the daily schedule that you set for yourself. And the reason it's the hardest part is because when you start writing down what you're going to do each hour of the day, it becomes a visual commitment. And then you post a copy of that in front of you in your office, and people see what you're supposed to be doing versus what you're doing. It really is a great motivational factor for everybody. So I'm never ever suggesting to somebody what their plan should be in terms of daily schedule. But I'm suggesting, and Rick, you would support this, if they're not spending a little bit of time in admin on their transactions, if they're not spending some time in prospecting, if they're not spending time in lead follow-up, if they're not spending time in pre-qualifying, they're never going to have a lot of appointments of value. So the day is broken down in terms of scheduling to really 4 or 5 simple parts that everybody can negotiate and do. And the last part of our business plan is called challenges and solutions. And we put this in because, you know, everybody has challenges in life. Challenge. This pandemic has really screwed up because I'm working from home and I have to be the school teacher and I have to be the principal and I have to take care of the home. I have to make sure my husband is okay and or my wife. These are challenges. These are real. And this is today's society. Solution. Create a solution with your spouse, with your kids. I said to you folks a couple months ago, the people that I feel the most empathy towards are the single men and lady in real estate. Because when you're in home confinement for a long period of time, it makes you go a little cuckoo in the head. There's no question about it. I mean, you can only talk to the wall and your dog so much before you want to jump out the window. If you're a married man and woman and you have children at home, all of a sudden the responsibilities you have, besides being a professional realtor, are accelerated. We're used to having our kids in school for 5 to 7 hours, and all of a sudden the kids are with us. So let's write down all the challenges. Maybe the challenge is I need to hire for the first time an assistant. All right, what's the solution? Okay, you got to think about how you're going to pay the person, the hours they're going to work. You have to think about how they're going to be trained. Okay, you're going to have to think about how you're going to hold them accountable. So the challenges and solutions. I'm going to challenge, Rick, everybody inside your organization that has access to this plan, and they all have access, to complete it in the next 5 to 7 days. And that's going to be the hardest part. Complete it in the next 5 to 7 days, then review it with Rick, if Rick's your coach, or you have an outside coach, review it with your manager, and let's start formulating and making sure that we have all of November, all of December to prepare for January 2nd or 3rd when we go back to work. So I would like to, Rick, if I may, open it up to a little Q&A if anybody has any questions on anything we've discussed today, because I want to make sure that we have everybody at least on this thought process of doing some business planning. So they can either put them in the chat box, or you can read them to me, or whatever is best for you.
If you want to put them in the chat box. I do know that we did sell out today, Mike. We had a few people that couldn't get on, but I already answered. We're recording it. It's going to go out right away. I already talked to Paul about getting it out right away. I'll also send out the business plan to them, because we can get it right off your website as well.
Which is,
and then the notes, once the notes come in. So if somebody, if you want to have a question, put it in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask Mike. Either one's fine. Don't be shy. He doesn't bite.
yeah. So Rick,
Hello, so Mike, Scott Fenning here, Berkshire Hathaway in Arizona.
thank you, Scott.
The beautiful thing about what you last said is challenge, and that just resonates through me. And it's like a fabric of everybody should be getting goosebumps and just going after it.
Thank you. Well, it is interesting, Scott, that the longer we're in the business, the less apt we are to identify those challenges, because we've gotten so used to all those bumps in the road. And we have that portion in just so we can smooth out those bumps in the road and become a little more efficient in what we're trying to accomplish. So thank you for that thought. That's very important.
Good.
Questions at all?
I think the biggest challenge for a lot of them, Mike, is, you know, the what you took them through initially, and that's going through the discipline to create the new habits in order to create the income, you know, the prospecting, the scripting, and understanding that it doesn't last forever. It's just that there's an uncomfortable period that you need to go through in order to create those disciplines and habits.
You know what's interesting about what you're saying? You know, Rick and I, one of the common things we have besides helping great agents become better is we both love sports, and we've always been big sports fans. And of course, Rick, being from the New England area, has a pretty dynamic team called the New England Patriots. And I read this great little article by Bill Belichick, the coach, and he was such a simple statement. He said, "We're only as good as the habits and skills that we have, period."
Yeah.
Now, Bill Belichick is probably one of the greatest coaches in the history of the game, but all he said was, we're only as good as the habits and skills we have. So part of the notes we're going to send everybody, we talk about both the skills and habits, and then of course the numbers, and then the plan itself. So it makes it fun. I had somebody say to me this morning early, Mike, why do people not ask questions on webinars? I said, because it's uncomfortable. They don't want to put themselves in an embarrassing situation with their friends on the call. And many times they don't know exactly what to ask. So again, Rick, I'll give him my email address. It's very simple, mike.ferry@mikeferry.com. mike.ferry@mikeferry.com. If you have any questions today about anything we've discussed, type them up. I'll answer them later this afternoon. So I'm going to say two things. I think John Joseph was on this call earlier. He's a member of the BHHS team and, of course, one of our coaches. So thank you, John, for your continued support. But I also want to say to Amanda and Rick, I mean, we've known each other a long time. And I'll tell you the best news in that, knowing you guys a long time, we're all getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the game. So Amanda, thanks for your support. Rick, thanks for your support. Rick, please tell Mark that I said hello. And with that, I'll say if there's no questions, work hard the next 2 months because your competition is not working.
Yeah.
For success are better than they've ever been before. Somebody said, Mike's email address, mike.ferry@mikeferry.com. So Rick, thank you. Amanda, thank you. John, thank you.
Mike.
See you all very soon.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Good job. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.